Dear participants from around the globe, welcome to this conference on human rights at the local and regional levels 2022. There are some 400 people present online, which I consider to be an incredible success for the organizers. Thank you to all of you who care for human rights. My name is Renate Kicker, and I'm delighted to be your co-moderator for the next 2 hours. Let me introduce the other moderator, Klaus Stahl. He is the operating director of the International Center for the Promotion of Human Rights at the local and regional levels, established under the auspices of UNESCO here in Graz, Austria. The center has successfully organized 2 scientific academies, each lasting 1 week and each with the overarching goal of discussing human rights go local. What works? This conference concludes now the 2nd academy under the title From Intentions to Commitments towards the effective and sustainable implementation of human rights. The academy was based on a publication titled From Commitments to Responsibility for Human Rights in Cities and Regions, which is the 3rd publication of the Human Rights Go Local publication series, edited by Klaus Stahl and Gerd Oberleitner. Gerd Oberleitner will later on introduce the outcome document of this year's academy. It is my pleasure now to hand over to Klaus Stahl, who will give you more details on what awaits us in today's conference.
Herzlich willkommen auch von meiner Seite. Guten Morgen und guten Abend gleichzeitig in alle Himmelsrichtungen. Wir sind beeindruckt, 400 Gäste aus aller Welt begrüßen zu dürfen. Ja, die Menschenrechtsgemeinde wächst und findet sich zusammen. Vielen Dank, Renate, für deine Vorstellung und Einleitung. Ich darf Renate Kicker auch kurz vorstellen. Professor Kicker hat 1999 mit Kollegen das Europäische Trainings- und Forschungszentrum für Menschenrechte und Demokratie an der Universität Graz mitbegründet und war von 2009 bis 2018 seine Vorsitzende. In ihr Direktorium fiel auch die Gründung des UNESCO-Zentrums. Im Rahmen der Neuausrichtung übernahm Renate Kicker den Vorstandsvorsitz in der dazu eigens gegründeten Stiftung. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, was erwartet Sie heute? Universität, Land Steiermark und Republik Österreich werden die Konferenz eröffnen.
The University and the Province of Styria and the Republic of Austria will open the conference. Then we have the pleasure of welcoming Gabriela Ramos, the Deputy Director General of UNESCO, and Gerd Oberleitner will then present the results of the outcome document, or which is the results of the Academy, which we then discuss in a high-level round with representatives of the UN and representatives of the municipal level, including Mayor Carr.
The first welcome address will be given by the rector of the University of Graz, Peter Riedler. I would like to stress that the university, all its previous rectors and also the current rector were and are great supporters to the UNESCO Center and its activities. Mr. Riedler, thank you for joining us today, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Renate Kicker. Ladies and gentlemen, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, ich darf Sie im Namen der Universität Graz sehr herzlich.
It is my great pleasure to welcome you most warmly to this conference. Well, it's still online, but we have all learned to manage these new digital tools over the past few months and years. And we have learned that online conferences present benefits as well, because we can invite far more people and far more people can attend these online meetings and conferences. So a warm welcome here to the University of Graz, even if it's a digital setting. Universities are places where the future is developed, and the University of Graz, as Renate has already mentioned, has a focus on human rights when it is about development frameworks and defining guiding principles and the basis for development. Many organizations, many people have been involved. Let me think of Wolfgang Benedek, Gord Oberleitner, in addition to Renate Kicker, and other people who have always together with the university worked in this field. And I would like to thank them for their commitment. I would like to thank all these people for working out framework conditions. And last but not least, the university always depends on the contribution of its scientists, and therefore I would like to thank them all for their contribution. Let me focus on two things. It has already been mentioned that various institutions and activities at the Graz University such as the Center for Human Rights and Democracy and the Refugee Center, all of them have been doing and are doing an important work. But what is also important is that all of these activities are embedded in a larger international framework. So we are very proud to have the UNESCO chair and the UNESCO center here at our university. This UNESCO center is the first center of competence for the promotion of human rights at the local and regional levels. And it is this work, this grassroots work at the local level that deals with the development of toolkits. It is this work that is reflected in the program and the agenda of today and also in the scientific research in the field of human rights at the Graz University. I know that there will be excellent examples later during this conference where we will see that local action has a local effect, but also international repercussions. And as I mentioned before, this embeddedness in the international framework is very important. And I would like to thank the organizers for hosting this event, for organizing it. This is a great opportunity for us, and I would like to thank the organizers and also like to thank the participants. First of all, I'd like to thank the hosts, Mr. Stadl and Ms. Kicker, and I wish you all a very successful conference. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your support. Thank you for your introductory words. Thank you for your support to the various activities that are conducted at the university. Now it's my great pleasure to welcome the governor of the state of Styria and ask him for his welcoming words. The Center for the Promotion of Human Rights at the local and regional levels once again puts human rights into the limelight with the second academy that was organized in Graz and Styria. The center is the first of its kind in Europe and only the second of its kind in the world. It is a hub for expertise in human rights at the local level, and this center provides important impetus in terms of human rights. And the center also contributes to a better cohesion in society. And this is something that is very urgently needed. And it boosts the Styrian approach to cooperation. I would like to express my thanks to the UNESCO Center for the Promotion of Human Rights at the local and regional levels, and also to the UNESCO Chair for Human Rights and Human Security at Karl Franzens University here in Graz. And I would like to thank them for organizing the Academy. Thank you. Science and the international community are working together here, and they are working for a better future. And I would also like to thank them because in times of globalization, in times of growing confusion and irritation, the important role that towns and regions play by assuming responsibility for human rights is underlined by this academy. The municipalities are the backbone of the country. I am happy to see that this academy and the conference as a platform for expertise in human rights, that they provide important impetus at the local level. Styria is an innovative region, a region of science, a region of knowledge, and has a long track record of successful cooperation with university institutions. Graz is a university city, and it is the ideal place to contribute to the development and to the importance of human rights. Human rights are more than just an interaction of science, politics, and the civil society. The awareness of human rights must also be anchored in the hearts and minds of the people. With this event and with the participants from all over the world, it is once again clear that the issue of human rights knows no borders and nations. Human rights must be promoted, and they must always be protected in the best possible manner. And this protection must always be adjusted to the current situations, especially at a time when they are so often abused and not granted.
Governor Schützenhöfer, for your constant support also of the center. We now welcome Ambassador Ernst Peter Brzezinski, head of the UNESCO unit in the Austrian Ministry of European and International Affairs. He represents the federal level of the Austrian Republic and is also personally involved in the Graz UNESCO Center as acting chairman of the governing board. Mr. Brzezinski, you have the floor.
Vielen Dank, Frau Professor. Verehrte internationale Gäste und Teilnehmer und Teilnehmerinnen auf aller Welt.
Thank you very much.
Vizegeneraldirektorin der UNESCO, Gabriela Ramos.
Esteemed international guests and participants from all over the world, Madam Vice Director General of UNESCO, Gabriela Ramos, Mr. Governor, Madam Mayor, magnificent Mr. President. In Austria, we have a nice saying. When something has been organized for the third time, it is already an established tradition. And it is in this sense that I am very happy to say today that we are here meeting in the beautiful city of Graz, the human rights city of Graz, and we are on the best way towards establishing a nice tradition. With this conference, we are summarizing the results of the second Winter Academy here in Graz, and the first Winter Academy, as we all know, was held last year in February 2021. Human rights go local, what works? This is the title of the conference, and it is also the motto of it. Professor Kicker, Dr. Stadl, thanks to you and thanks to your team, and if everything goes well, we will meet again next year in 2023, and then finally we will have established a new Graz tradition. And I would like to thank you and also your team, but I would also like to express my thanks to Professor Dr. Gerd Oberleitner, who holds the UNESCO Chair for Human Rights and Human Security at Karl Franz University in Graz. Over the last few years, we have made it very clear worldwide, and we have seen how quickly the designs and concepts of democracy and human rights can be put into questions. Concepts that have been considered to be irreversible in large parts of the world are again being scrutinized. And one aspect plays a very important role in this discussion, namely trust. Trust in the institutions, trust in bodies, official bodies. And this is why the topic that you are dealing with here and that has been dealt with at the Academy is of fundamental importance. And this topic was from intentions to commitments.
We are really privileged to host today a most extraordinary panel. Personalities from all around the world. We heard the amazing figure from Professor Kicker, 400 people. Once again, welcome. Gabriela Ramos, the Assistant Director General of UNESCO for Social and Human Affairs, just completed an extraordinary task, preparing conclusions, the first universally acknowledged document ever on the ethical side of artificial intelligence. This document was adopted on the occasion of the 45th General Conference on 25th of November 2021. Highest respect and congratulations, Your Excellency. But we'll also hear about the experience of many other personalities. The president of the network of local elected women of Africa. Perspectives from the point of view of the human rights policy advisor of a city in South Korea. We'll listen to the Secretary General of UCLG Africa. We'll listen to quite a few members of the distinguished United Nations family and many others. And this, ladies and gentlemen, I'm deeply convinced, is the secret of our success. An intense international network of personalities who work hard every day to achieve the effective and sustainable implementation of human rights. Are human rights at stake? Unfortunately, yes, every day. Because sometimes it's so much easier to break human rights rather than make them prevail. Will we lose the battle? No, we will not lose the battle, because personalities like all of you will make sure that the necessity of human rights remains clear and visible. In this context, I would also like to thank two former mayors of the city of Graz, Alfred Stinkl and Siegfried Nagel, who have spared no effort to make the capital of Styria a genuine and internationally respected capital of human rights. I would also like to thank the newly elected mayor of Graz, Mrs. Elke Carr. We'll have the pleasure to hear her later today in this discussion. And she will make sure that this tradition of Graz, I'm deeply convinced, will continue. And Graz will also in future play a big role in international human rights. And last but not least, I would like to thank my distinguished predecessor as opening speaker, the governor of Styria, Mr. Hermann Schützenhöfer, who has made sure that Styria supports the Graz Center for the Promotion of Human Rights at the local and regional level, and many more important human rights activities on the state level. Austria got elected on the executive board of UNESCO for the period of 2021 to 2025. And human rights was one of the central issues of our election campaign. So I can assure you, we shall do everything to promote the concept of universal human rights also in future, such as we have been doing it over many decades. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have the privilege to hear a keynote speech by my friend, Assistant Director General Gabriela Ramos. Then we'll be very curious to hear about the outcome of the second Winter Academy of Graz, which will be presented by Professor Oberleitner. And then, of course, we're looking forward to a very, very interesting and important panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Besten Dank, Herr Botschafter Brzezinski.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Brzezinski, for the introductory words and for the welcoming words and for the support that your ministry grants and for the excellent cooperation that our center enjoys with your ministry. You mentioned our special guest of honor, and I would like to do it once again, the Assistant Director General for the Social and Human Sciences of UNESCO, Gabriela Ramos. and she will hold a speech. She's the head of the Social and Human Sciences Department of the UN Education, Culture and Science Organization in Paris. She is in charge of inclusive and peaceful development of society, equality for the sexes, promotion of young people, how values can be shared through sports. She's also in charge of anti-racism and anti-discrimination and ethics and artificial intelligence. Gabriela Ramos knows Graz because she was here last year. Thank you very much, Gabriela Ramos, for being here again today, and I look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Last year I was in Graz, and that was a high mark of my starting to be the ADG for Social and Human Sciences. And now, unfortunately, again, we are trapped in this virtual setting, but it's just so powerful to hear all of you, dear directors, dear Dean, dear Governor, dear Peter, dear Chair, and just look at it. Is the fact that you have this very impressive power of calling so many, the foundation, the center, which is, as you said, a hallmark of the human rights agenda of UNESCO, the chair, but also I should say that the city of Graz and the region of Syria have been really leading the fort on these issues for quite some time. And therefore, I'm very proud to be here with you. And yes, Peter, we are also celebrating that Austria is part of the governing board with this very strong support to human rights agenda. I'm sure that we're going to be doing great. And I also want to salute the mayor. So the tradition, now the academy, I would say that the positive agenda that you have put together, the very clear focus on outcomes, which is what we are all looking for. It's a source of great optimism, in the sense that you're leading the chart in terms of how do we put human rights at the core and the center of the policies that we need to move going forward. And we are going to be focusing on the importance of translating these bulletproof commitments into concrete and lasting change. And this is no easy path, because this is the third year of the pandemic. And we know that besides the dangers and the attacks on human rights on so many areas, we know that this pandemic has had a very harmful social and economic consequences that are putting the more vulnerable, but in general, they're putting our societies in a very, very difficult position. To understand what cities can do, what the regions can do, what you have been doing in protecting the right of people to have a meaningful life, to have opportunities, to have the chances to advance their own progress, we need to understand the context we are, which is quite complex. We know that the COVID pandemic drove inequalities even further, drove anti-racism expressions, drove discrimination, and it has affected the most vulnerable populations. The 2021 SDG Progress Report indicated that the pandemic is projected to push back the poorest groups of countries to a full 10 years of the SDGs achievements. If you look at the targets, every single area had been really pushed back in terms of life expectancy, health status, inequalities, education. It's just everywhere. And we need to really upscale the effort to deliver on the last decade of action. An estimated 130 million people are going to fall into poverty, the first time in many decades. And there has been a massive loss of incomes, limited social protections, and rising prices that are really putting at risk many of our families. Not to talk about, of course, one of the objects of the action of cities like Graz, which is to protect migrants and refugees. But it has been causing a great disaster. This pandemic has been causing a great disaster that is calling us to uphold our actions and to be much more forceful in looking for the solutions. In terms of children lost learning and well-being, especially young girls and women that have suffered a disproportionate share of the job and income losses and increased care work. We know that this crisis has a women face because it's not only the fact that they are at the forefront of the fight against the pandemic, but they are also overrepresented in the sectors that have been massively impacted by the crisis. 527 million women are linked to the entertainment, accommodation and food services, real estate, manufacturing, retail trade. And so this is an area that I feel would really need to find its way in our commitments, because we always need a gender lens. And what to say about domestic violence. Even in the most advanced countries, the ones that have institutional settings that are well equipped to address these issues, there have been an unacceptable level of increased violence against women. And I think this is something that we need to grapple with in our societies and to try to find solutions where the cities and the local and the region have something to do, because it happens in the cities. All these things happen in a city, happen in a region, happen in a community, happen in a neighborhood. So you really have this connection with what people are living to find solutions that are really tailored to what the needs of what their experiences. So what is the role of cities? I would say it's everywhere. It's everything. Of course, we need national frameworks. Of course, we need all the issues that need to be organized in terms of policies and finances and budgets. But the reality is that cities can make the difference, and you have proved that right with the center, with the chair, with the university. But the city of Graz has really proved it right. And many of the people that are accompanying now us in this journey around the table have also delivered in their own communities and their own sectors. The cities host more than half of the world population and 52% of the nearly 300 million international migrants. They have to be at the forefront of all these challenges, and local responses must address these issues in their complexity, finding lasting solutions for the vulnerable groups in all policy domains under the city's responsibilities. We are happy to say, and you are part of it also, but the UNESCO International Coalition of Inclusive and Sustainable Cities that has over 600 a strong global network, make every effort every day, every year to give full meaning to the commitments contained in the 7 regional and national 10-point action plans, but also in this effort that you are carrying forward for the 3rd consecutive year on the Winter Academy, to learn, to project, to understand, and also to share our resolve to address the challenges on the human rights issue. I was very pleased actually to see that you went into very concrete areas that are of high importance. There are many, but let me just focus on housing. I think housing deserves a particular attention, not only because we are confronting, again, rising prices, but also because of their significance for reducing poverty and security and providing for the place where families can thrive. ICAR members have also committed to draw up legal normative instrument for public and private bodies involved in renting and selling accommodation in order to combat inequalities and affordable access to housing. Again, there we have facts that are not the most encouraging, because even before COVID, affording quality housing for low-income populations was increasingly challenging, with government's investment decreasing over the last decades. And there we also have difference, because while middle-income families spend 20% of their income in housing, for the low income, that's 40%, and many times it's just impossible. We see more and more our young people being unable to face that or to have access to their own lodging, and stay more and more in their houses of their parents. And this is at the rate of 80% of young people staying at home in countries like Italy and Greece. And I think this is not how it should be. And so we must also draw on the wealth of cities practices, and ICAR Graz has a lot to share in this respect. We have wonderful examples like the Belgian city of Ghent that helps vulnerable home owners with limited financial resources to renovate their houses and improve their living situation through an innovative recurrent fund. The city of Chicago, which is also in the ICAR, through its housing authority, serves more than 20,000 low-income households by providing safe, decent, and affordable housing. And the city of Gwangju in the Republic of Korea provides shelters and access to healthcare and vulnerable population. I know the city of Graz has its own experiences, but I think it's really important that we go to this level of detail and that the commitments and action are really delivering concrete change on the ground. As Peter mentioned, member states in UNESCO have really step up their efforts to uphold the agenda of human rights and the respect and promotion. They have agreed to a global call against racism and discrimination. Last year, they have launched the Global Forum against Racism and Discrimination, and they have asked us to develop a roadmap against this ill, to take very strong action. And this, of course, needs to engage you. It needs to engage your actions. It needs to engage the learning from each other and from the good practices. And this is being, of course, informed also by our programs like the Slave Route, the General History of Africa, the master classes against racism and discrimination, but also, as Peter mentioned, by this fantastic breakthrough that UNESCO's members achieved in the General Conference in November by adopting the very first, very ambitious, very strong global standard on the ethics of artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence is a powerful tool to advance many of the goals that we have as humanity. We have seen how much it has helped to produce a vaccine in record time in the context of the pandemic. We know how much the analytical capacities can help us, I don't know, manage better the food system in the world or fight trafficking. But we know that it's also creating misinformation, hate speech, and the exponential reverberation of ills that we don't like in the real world, but that have this impact in the digital world. So we are going to be implementing that. And in the context of the roadmap against racism, we will be launching an innovative scanning study that analyzes the impact of institutional, legal, and informal frameworks on inclusion. We would love to work with the participants of this academy in piloting this scanning exercise. We are also going to have a toolkit for policy design, which targets policymakers at all levels to support them in combating racist ideologies and discrimination, and revamping the institutional and legal infrastructure to fight this. So through our cities networks and through the leadership of cities like the ones that are participating today, we will be collaborating with a wide range of partners, including with our GRAS Center and our GRAS Chair, to organize policy dialogues and pilot workshops and go to see how much the scanning study and the toolkit can be helpful. We hope that this is going to be a source of guidance, drawing cities concrete examples. I call on you to bring those, the ones that make you proud, and the ones where you learn that we're not so successful, but that maybe have very good insights to improve our action. And we're gonna put together a handbook on welcoming the inclusion of migrants prepared in cooperation with ICAR. So all these framework, all these initiatives, each one with its own programs, really requires political leadership, requires willingness, and requires the participation of local governments to flesh out the details on accountable agenda of inclusion. So we welcome the outcome document for this recommendation on how to ensure greater accountability towards the realization of human rights at the local level. And UNESCO, we will work hand in hand with you to make this concrete and sustainable. And in closing, again, having a foundation, having a center, having the federal government, having the city, having the governor, really shows your commitment and your resolve to come together. So we are very proud to be part of this group, of this group, I like to call them on champions on leading institutions and people that are delivering for this important agenda. I would not want to miss the opportunity also to mention the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights that have always been really the source of inspiration, UN Habitat, and the EU Fundamental Rights Agency. All of them, my real appreciation for their contributions. And I'm really looking forward to the outcomes of this conference and to the outcome document to continue pushing this very important agenda. So thank you very much for your invitation and good luck with the next steps.
Thank you, Assistant Director General Gabriela Ramos, for your inspiring keynote speech. Let me also thank you for your consistent support of the close cooperation between the Graz Center and UNESCO, as well as your personal participation in the Center's governing board.
Thank you very much also from my side. It was really a pleasure to have you with us. And I may now turn to Gerd Oberleitner, UNESCO Professor for Human Rights and Human Security at the University of Graz and the co-organizer of the Academy Human Rights Go Local What Works. And he will now present the final document, the outcome document of the Academy. Gerd, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Klaus. Thank you. It is my pleasure to present to you the outcome document, which has been elaborated by the Academy Human Rights Go Local What Works over the past days. The outcome document contains suggestions and recommendations on how to move from intentions to commitments and towards the effective and sustainable implementation of human rights at the local and regional level. The text has been prepared by the participants of the Academy in a collaborative way with inputs from our partners, which have been mentioned: UNESCO, the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Fundamental Rights Agency, UN Habitat, but also representatives of UCLG, United Cities and Local Governments, as well as the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities of the Council of Europe, by representatives of cities, local and regional authorities and municipalities in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in the Arab world, and in the Americas, by members of civil society, academics, and by established practitioners in the field, as well as next generation human rights professionals. The document is addressed to local and regional authorities, cities and municipalities. It is not formally adopted as a decision. It is meant as a supportive encouragement, elaborated and formulated by all participants in the Academy. In the document, the participants of the Second Academy and Conference on Human Rights at the local and regional levels first recall that human rights implementation is a shared task for all tiers of government, but increasingly and particularly for the local level, for authorities and communities, because this is where human rights have their greatest impact. They also agree that explicit commitments to human rights do have a strong role, both as in their symbolic power, as well as in their operational purpose, because they mobilize local actors. The outcome document also explicitly acknowledges the importance of international organization support to the local level to formulate and enact human rights commitments, as well as the accompanying framework, particularly the Agenda 2030, with its call to leave no one behind and to work with and for the next generation. And the participants in the Academy also take note of the variety of approaches, of charters, ordinances, declarations in existence or planned on human rights, and emphasize that any such commitments should be flexible enough to accommodate different approaches in expressing human rights commitments. Specifically, the outcome document encourages local level governments worldwide, first of all, to make such commitments explicitly to human rights, substantiating how human rights norms, principles, and standards inform the policies and programs within the competencies and the local context, with a specific emphasis on leaving no one behind, as well as to publicize and disseminate such commitments. The outcome document also asks to build such commitments on research on human rights at the local level, emphasizing at the same time the importance of human rights education, as well as the need to consider existing human rights action plans on the regional and national level. The outcome document also asks local level governments to ensure that their commitments reflect the local government in its various functions, as a democratic institution, as a rule maker, as a service provider, as an employer, as an economic actor in implementing human rights, combating inequality and discrimination. And particularly the outcome document asks the local level to strengthen participation, and participation also of young people and youth in all stages of the policy cycle at the local level. The text also asks local level governments to seek inspiration from other actors at the local, national, international level for such commitment and collaborate actively with civil society, with academia, with national human rights institutions, with the next generation and other relevant actors, as well as with other local governments. And of course, most importantly, out of this commitment should arise concrete actions to implement the commitment and incorporate a human rights-based approach into the local government's operation, which has to include substantive, procedural, as well as institutional aspects of the commitments, as well as a framework to measure and review achievements. And finally, local level governments should build local, regional, national, international alliances. They should join networks and seek exchange with peers, with regional and international actors and organizations, as well as with civil society, the next generation and researchers to live up to their commitment. This is what participants of the Academy suggest, so as to move from intentions to commitments on human rights at the local and regional level. In the name of the organizers of this year's Academy, let me once more express our gratitude to everyone who participated and contributed to this text and to this outcome. Thank you.
Danke, Gerd. Und ich darf mit dieser Vorstellung.
Thank you, Gerd. And with this presentation of the outcome document, I would like to start the discussion with our distinguished guests. We are trying to discuss in the virtual space the advantages that it gets through to so many people at the same time. So we have a lot of participants and they can all participate in the discussion. This time we thought of a special format, which is to use theater scenes played by actors in order to illustrate very abstract concepts. But first of all, I would like to welcome the guests, the Academy and conference participants. Human Rights Go Local encourage decision makers on the local level worldwide to adopt an intention on the implementation of human rights and to make them responsible for the implementation. We would like to ask you why such a transformation towards a concrete assumption of responsibility is important. We would like to ask you which recommendations can you make from your experiences and which hints and suggestions do you have how this can be done successfully?
We welcome as a first speaker, Todd Howland, Chief of Branch for Development, Economic and Social Rights in the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights based in Geneva. Todd Howland has gained extensive practical experience in a wide range of human rights and international issues, having worked in or related to over 30 countries. He has been involved and is involved in a significant number of capacity building and educational projects that have been designed to increase the level of compliance with human rights standards. Mr. Howland, we would like to invite you to give your view why this transformation, which has been expressed as important by the Academy, why would you recommend particularly from your experience, and how can this successfully be implemented?
Well, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. I want to thank you and the organizers of the Winter Academy and Conference. Human Rights Goes Local, What Works, from Intentions to Commitments towards the Effective and Sustainable Implementation of Human Rights. I think all too often when we think of human rights, we think of member states of the UN, the Human Rights Council, national governments, those that have signed the human rights treaties. But my own experience working in many of our in-country presences has been that human rights is something so relevant for individuals, and that the reality is that local and regional governments have much more contact with the citizens than the national government. The interaction that's played between local governments and the citizens oftentimes highlights how useful human rights can be. But there's a gap between the understanding of, let's say, how human rights can form useful policy guardrails that can help local and regional governments grapple and overcome many of the issues that they deal with, from discrimination to housing to leaving no one behind. These are issues that local governments, regional governments are dealing with every day. So there's 3 recommendations. 1, it's important for local and regional governments to explicitly recognize their human rights obligations. Conformity of their laws and policies with human rights law isn't just a human rights obligation. The regional and local governments will find it extremely useful to see how others have dealt with this and how the international mechanisms have interpreted these obligations. Second, oftentimes what we see is that a government comes in, is very interested in human rights, they'll start doing work, but then they haven't created the types of institutions that pass on between government and government. It's very important for local and regional governments to create ombudsmans, human rights offices, these types of institutions that pass from one government to another and are always there for citizens in terms of understanding their rights and being able to file complaints and to participate in their government. Third, it's important for local and regional governments to create benchmarks, assessments, and to monitor progress, using human rights as a tool to say, how are we doing? What challenges are we facing? And how does human rights help us to see how we're actually improving the quality of life of people in our region, in our locality? Thank you very much. I'll pass on to the other panelists.
Vielen Dank, Herr Howland, für das Eingangs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Howland, for this short statement. Now I'd like to welcome Raphael Tutz, Director of Global Solutions Divisions of UN Habitat in Nairobi. This is the UN organization that is in charge of cities. Raphael Tutz is in charge of developing the guidelines for the sustainable development of cities and urbanization at the global level. He is responsible for a global study on how to fight the pandemic in cities, and he played an essential role in developing the SDGs of the United Nations. Mr. Tutz, why do we need a transformation towards more responsibility for human rights at the local level? And what would you say from your point of experience? What could it look like?
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting UN Habitat to this very important conference. Both the organizers and the authorities and the partners in Austria, this is a very unique opportunity to share our insights. So yes, we are the agency of the United Nations for cities and local and regional governments. And our motto is leave no one and no place behind. So we are focusing a lot on spatial inequality, which is a very important concept of our work. So the pandemic, as was said earlier, has really underscored the crucial role of local and regional governments. And this role has never been undisputed, has just been underlined, and this will continue to be a critical role. And we view cities as critical human rights actors that have indeed legal obligations to respect and protect and fulfill those international rights. And they are frontline responders, as has been said by previous speakers, so that issues and priorities that affect the communities most can be highlighted. So we are committed to reinforcing the roles of cities, and the reason why they need reinforcement is that local authorities often do not have the statutory competencies or the finance to work on the implementation of human rights on their own. So they have a unique opportunity and position because they understand local actors and dynamics in a way that can leverage different policy levers. For example, I would like to use the example of homelessness. They can be very effective in reducing homelessness, not necessarily because of their financial resources, but by convening different partners, bringing them together to prevent and to bring solutions and find solutions to the problems that face residents who are trapped in homelessness. So they are responsible for a number of services in the city, like education and training and health and employment, and that can ensure that services are coordinated effectively and that those can reduce the perpetuation of homelessness and other barriers to human rights implementation. So that's, I think, a key example of how local authorities can work without having all the powers. But in addition, and to conclude, they can do many other things. They have the power to lead the construction of a shared vision on human rights, which highlighting the role of different partners in the community. They also have the possibilities to truly engage and share information on human rights and explain to citizens what type of resources and support are available and how to access it. And finally, they have rich data in their administration and can really help to establish partnership with different universities, private sector, and civil society to enhance the understanding of the local challenges that prevent the full realization of human rights. So I'll leave it here, looking forward to the debate. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Tutz. We greet now Ioannis Dimitrakopoulos, Scientific Advisor at the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights based in Vienna. Ioannis Dimitrakopoulos conducted or coordinated national and transnational European funded research projects on a range of human rights issues, for example, discrimination, racism, anti-Semitism, Roma issues, rights of the child, and others. Mr. Dimitrakopoulos, I would like to invite you to share your view why this transformation from commitment to responsibility as recommended by the Academy is important. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. And hello to everyone around the world. Thanks for inviting the EU's Fundamental Rights Agency. To put it sort of shortly, because most people have already spoken about this, for us, the litmus test of international human rights is actually the extent to which they take root at national, but also at local level. Now, the national level is well known. Governments are the duty bearers. They have a responsibility to fulfill human rights, but why at local level? Well, because this transforms the legally binding, but rather general or vague statements into specific actions that can directly affect people's lives in those areas where a local authority has a competence and therefore has a potential to make a tangible difference. That can be in housing, it can be schooling, it can be the environment, it can be health, transport, sports. It's not only about the rights of minorities. It's not only about equality and non-discrimination, but human rights are much broader and they concern everyone. Now, how do we make this work at local level? Well, in our view, 3 points are very important. First, we need to explain to both local elected representatives and the local authority officials that their policy choices must be guided by these general commitments that we call human rights, which they are obliged to honor by law, very often by national law. But we need to explain them why they need to do that. Then secondly, we need to explain this also to the citizen and help them claim their rights, invite them to participate in local initiatives that actually fulfill, materialize these rights. Finally, we need to actually transform a general commitment to a specific responsibility, starting small with practical projects which can showcase how better results can actually be achieved when they're anchored on a human rights-based approach. And how can we do this successfully? First, we need to have very clear and actionable objectives that match the real competences of local government. Secondly, we need to ensure that we have a political commitment accompanied by the necessary resources to, as they say, walk the talk. And that's very important for the citizen. And finally, by engaging citizens themselves in both designing, implementing, and evaluating actions. And this improves accountability and trust to local government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are now grateful for the participation of the president of the network of local elected women of Africa since 2019 and mayor of Fumbolo, Ivory Coast, Makura Coulibaly Dao. Madame Dao holds the Award of Excellence and the Award of Order to the offices of the Ivorian Order of Merit. Madame Dao, you have the floor. Please open your camera so that we can see and listen to you.
So, okay, first of all, I would like to thank you for the organization of this conference. I would like to share with you the vision of Refilin. Refilin is my organization. What do we do? As you know, I'm the chairwoman of a network of locally elected women, and we are working on behalf of the United Nations Africa Network. We are also represented in the African Commission, and this network is organized in an executive council, and it works for ensuring that the elected representatives, the female representatives, are able to effectively implement human rights and also to ensure that there is access to important services such as education and other services, health services, for instance. And we have an institutional setting for that. The first demand is that women at risk, especially young women, should be accompanied in order to make sure that the young women do get the safety that they are entitled to. Number two, the local elected representatives who are women want to make sure that local education measures are implemented, and the institutions for these schools should be strengthened so that they can absorb the girls and give them education. So did you hear me? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Fernando Gil Lozano. She is currently suffering from COVID-19, and so it is not possible for her to attend this meeting live. She is director of the first International Center for the Promotion of Human Rights in Buenos Aires. And this center was already established in 2019, so 10 years before ours was established. So, of course, we would like to send our best wishes for her recovery from here and hope that she will recover soon. Fernando Gil Lozano was from 2007 to 11 the representative of Buenos Aires in the Argentine parliament, and from 2015 and 19 a member of parliament of Mercosur. Since last year, she has been the director of the UNESCO Center in Buenos Aires, and she sent us a video message, and we will then send this video message shortly before starting the final discussion round.
Human rights policy advisor and official representative of the city of South Korea. Among his numerous activities, Mr. Shin is a director of the International Center serving the local international community and runs the International Human Rights Training Center in Gwangju. He's the organizer of World Human Rights Cities Fora since 2014 and member of the Asia-Pacific Coalition of Cities Against Racism. Welcome you again, because we have had your participation already last year. So the floor is yours.
Thank you for the invitation to such an important conference. As Assistant General Director Gabriela Ramos emphasized the importance of political leadership, and as Mr. Todd Howland mentioned, the political leadership and the local government role is really important in transferring the human rights commitment into responsibility and have them implemented. But it is possible when the political leadership feel that they are safe doing so with the majority voter support. And then the support is possible again when they are supported, their agenda is supported by the local civil society, mass media, probably most importantly, party members. And it is also sustainable. Human rights advocacy by local governments is sustainable in the future when the younger generation are properly educated to become more human rights sensitive. I am privileged to witness the transformation of South Korea from dictatorship, more importantly, military dictatorship, to one of the most dynamic democracy and then booming culture in this part of the world for the last 40 years. I think it is possible because of the civil society movement and then people's participation in politics and cultural activities. However, we are facing the threat of democracy and human rights movement by competition-based education. Or rather, the young folks are more interested in having high-paying job. And then the competition-oriented education continues to make the growing generation less political less interested in inclusiveness, human rights. So I hope that such an international solidarity through this kind of world conference and an active involvement by world organizations like UNESCO can boost human rights oriented education for the younger folks and the general public. Through this, I really hope that the local government's involvement in human rights can be more sustainable. Thank you for the invitation.
Vielen herzlichen Dank, Professor Shin.
Thank you very much, Professor Shin, for your statement. Now I would like to introduce to you Michael Rentour. He will be the host and moderator for the rest of this discussion. He's a professor at the University of Graz, and his work is dedicated to political participation and transformation by means of stage methods. And he is the art director of the theater firm Interact.
Yes, thank you very much, Klaus, for the introduction and welcome. I will want to guide you through the coming discussion rounds. There will be 3 rounds, and theatre plays will be a part of it, because every scene will be introduced by a short video clip, and these videos have been produced by Interact from Graz. Interact has been working for many years with participative theatre methods, such as the forum theatre, which was recognized as an official tool for social change. So with this theatre, they contribute to social justice, and the perspective that they show to us is that of affected people, like no one must be left behind. That is what they embody with this. There are interactive dialogues between people who are directly affected from the civil society, and then there are also the political decision makers. They want to connect these 2 things in order to have their say in the creation of the legal settings. So the theatre shows scenes that illustrate a certain problem. Even today, the scenes in the video should trigger discussion, and they want to illustrate certain aspects that are mentioned in the outcome document. One scene is always one of the real background that shows to you a violation of human rights from the point of view of the affected victims. The second is the city of the future, so to speak. It takes up recommendations from the final document of the academy, and it assumes that they have been implemented and wants to show the improvements through the implementation. So the video clips give you an idea about how the participative method is an ideal tool to create awareness among the people, and how this can then be raised to the awareness on the city level, and how it can be connected to human rights work. The situation is illustrated in 2 clips. As I have said, the first clip shows you a current situation illustrated by the Interact Theatre Group. They show and illustrate a discrimination in the residential tenancy market. And we now start with video 1. Hello. Well, tell us, is that 37 square meters flat still available? Yes, it is, but you have to be really fast because there are many people who are interested. No problem, I'm on the way. I'd like it. Oh, well, in that case, I only need the income statements for the last 3 months. Here you are. What's this? Well, it's my UB40. UB40, you're on unemployment benefit. I'm sorry, I can't have you. Why? What's going on? Hello, Mr. Sivkovic. I wanted to look at the flat, and I actually have money for rent and for down payment. Oh, that's very good. Yes, I would be very happy about this flat because I want out of this men's hostel. Men's hostel? Yes, of course, in a men's hostel. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Sivkovic. I've changed my mind. You're not the right person for this flat. But that's just a shame. Come here, come here. Hello. Hello. Is that yours? This dog? Yes, but you can't take it. But it's my dog. No, in this house, we don't admit any pets. Yeah, but he's a nice dog. Yeah, but they still bark and they still basically piss and stuff like that. I mean, you can stay, but not the dog. It's a female dog as well. Chic. Hey, I'm here because of flat. Not available anymore. Gone, gone, flat gone. Bye, 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 gone. What's happening? It's gone. Why? What's going on? I don't know. I never thought that it is so difficult to find a suitable tenant. All I want is somebody who is an Austrian who has work and who doesn't cause any problems for me. So we now assume that the recommendations from the outcome document have been implemented. That's in clip 2. So we show clip 2 and we go into the town hall of Graz, where there is a meeting of the task force residential policies, and it wants to sustainably reduce and prevent discrimination in the housing market.
I was a part of the legislative theater project, and I noticed things from my own experience.
Hello, I'm here because I am the co-author of a large-scale study on discrimination in the housing market in Graz.
Hello, I am the spokesperson for all initiatives in Graz that work for human rights, for social justice, and to overcome discrimination.
I belong to the landlords interest group. We too have a great interest in ensuring that human rights are respected.
I am one of the 4 majors of Graz, and this is a very important meeting for me today, because the city of Graz wants to take additional steps to eliminate discrimination in the housing market in a sustainable manner. A warm welcome to you all. It's good to have you back here again. We now have the results of a study and a legislative theatre project. Today will be about what conclusions we draw from them and what our next step will be for the overall process. Please share your evaluations with me.
Our study results fully confirm what we just saw in the scene. These are not isolated cases.
Yeah, the facts are on the table. Now it's time to work together to develop concrete proposals and then to put them into action.
We have developed a whole series of proposals in the legislative theatre project.
It is important for us to educate, to inform, and to support landladies and landlords. The ETC workshop series on overcoming prejudice should definitely be continued. One more thing. The result of the study show that to overcome discrimination in the housing market, investors are becoming more and more important.
Thank you. I made a note of that. We will invite someone from the investors interest group to the next regular meeting. What other ideas do you have?
Ja, nun ausgehend von diesen szenischen Eindrücken.
Well, starting from these scenes, the first was the current situation and then the future. So in this outcome document, we're talking about the actors against the players, but the practices were discussed, and it says that local institutions are those that are closest to the citizens. Nevertheless, their efforts are often not reflected in the everyday life of people, as we have seen using the example of discrimination in the housing market. So it would be an interesting question for us to hear what the national and international players regard as necessary for the support of the local governments, and also to inspire local governments and to help them to do justice and fulfill what the local people expect from them. In this discussion round, I would like to also welcome the Mayor of Graz, welcome Elke K. to this discussion round, and I would like to pass the floor to her first. May I speak in German? Yes. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It is an honor for me to be in such a meeting and to say something about something that really has been close to my heart ever since I started in politics. And it is not only a personal wish of mine that equality in access to housing is a necessity. It is a necessity, the equality, and it is a human right. You can leave a lot of things to the market, but one thing you cannot leave to the market, which is the access to affordable housing. Because the market can control many things, but it cannot control the housing issue. It cannot solve the housing problem. I'm absolutely convinced that it is a task of the cities and of the communities to ensure that there is affordable and even attractive housing available for the population of the city. In Graz, or in the city where I live, maybe the situation might be better than in other big cities. Nevertheless, even here, we can see that the disengagement, the gap between housing construction and what people can afford for housing is widening, because people cannot afford to live in these apartments anymore. And also, the public sector has often been abandoned. Often public housing has been sold off or privatized. And I would like to say this. One important thing is that property, that real estate that belongs to everybody cannot be privatized. We cannot allow this privatization. Why not? Because we need it for families, because we need it for human beings who do not have that much money and who are not able to afford to rent a flat at any price, never mind buy one. Therefore, the second measure, and I implemented that when I was the Councillor for Housing. So we extended the construction of social housing. We made it more available. We have achieved quite a lot of things, but nevertheless, we have a long way to go. The extension or the greater availability of public housing without restrictions must be promoted. There mustn't be restrictions in terms of ethnicity either. People who live in this city and work in this city must also have the possibility to access such housing. On top of it, it must also be ensured that private housing should, well, private housing should also exist, but there must be a price cap so that speculation isn't rife, so that it doesn't, so that speculation doesn't proliferate. There is private housing that is affordable still, but the development is still that most private rents are too high, and that can only be solved if the public sector and the legislator intervenes, and if they introduce this cap, a maximum limit. And if we have people in our country that come from other countries and are excluded from many public services, then nevertheless you must draw the line at public housing. The public sector and the local government must ensure that these people find accommodation, even if the federal laws would not grant them access to such accommodation. So even if certain national prerequisites are not fulfilled yet, the local government must make sure that they can have access to public housing if they live and work here. I think that this is an obligation for the city to ensure that all its inhabitants have a roof over their head. This is an obligation because otherwise you can't have access to social services either. This is a big issue because it doesn't matter whether we are talking about people from European countries or from third countries, because the law distinguishes between them. In some respects, this might be understandable, but in my opinion, it never is acceptable if it is about having a roof above your head. You can't have these people being homeless and exclude them from provision of accommodation. The examples that Michael Renschuh illustrated with his theater, and this really is the naked truth. So nobody must have a flat rejected because of the social background. And it mustn't be rejected. Nobody must be rejected accommodation on the basis of whether they have a pet, or whether they have children, or whether they have other things. At the moment, the landlord or the landlady can often say, I don't give you a flat, I don't give you my apartment because you come from another country. I don't give you a flat because you're unemployed. And this must not be, because this is discrimination in action. You can only ever change that if there is a right to accommodation. And these things really would have to be written down in the Constitution and in the law. There must not be an excuse for refusing accommodation to somebody because of the things that we have seen in this theater piece, because they come from another ethnicity, because they have a pet, because they are unemployed. There are so many things about accommodation. Many of the people who attend come from different countries, from different regions, and the conditions here are different. So I can't go into all the details of what we would need here in our town specifically, but there is one thing that all the world has in common, all the cities in the world have in common, I believe, and all the politicians need to face up to this. It must not be that people are homeless and cannot have a roof above their head just because they cannot afford it at a specific moment. In order to avoid homelessness, you need an alliance across all the regions and cities. This is a question that must be completely independent and irrespective of the political party that you support and that you're a member of. Because without your own home, nothing is possible. You can't have an employment. School education is not possible. And if you see that even in this country, in this rich country, where we have a lot of affluence, so if even here we see people who live in intolerable and unacceptable conditions, then it means that we must act as politicians. And also we see that in this city there are people who exploit people, who are going through a tight spot, and this must not be. Thank you, Mayor. We will return to that in the next round. This was a strong statement, such as a community which implements the right to have an accommodation. And all discussants, would you please be short, because we are behind schedule. So I would like your statements to be short. For the communities, it is important that international players must be involved in the fight against discrimination and in the effort to provide public housing. So how can we support the local politicians? I would like to pass the word first to Mr. Howland, to Mr. Todd Howland, Chief of the Branch for Development, Economic and Social Rights.
Thank you again for the opportunity. And I just really want to highlight the importance of theater and how local and regional governments can employ accessible messaging. I think the theater actually indicated a couple of problems, right? It indicated that the landlord wasn't aware that she actually should be thinking about human rights. All of our rights are interrelated. My rights relate to your rights. And so she needs to be fully more aware. And I think local governments can use theater and other types of, let's say, public messaging to help get this across. Second, I think the theater relative to the meeting in the city was interesting because they were searching for how do we deal with this ongoing problem of discrimination. The one thing I think that would be useful is how do you create an ongoing institution, an ombudsman office, a human rights office that will go from one government to another. Obviously, the current mayor is very interested and aware of the situation, but how do we create a situation where the citizens can then complain saying, hey, I believe I was discriminated against, I need your support, and that institution then will intervene to help create the education and create the response needed. I think it's a very good vehicle, and thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Vielen Dank. Ja, ich möchte Raphael Tutz.
Thank you very much. Then Raphael Tutz. Maybe you could share your opinion from the perspective of UN Habitat.
Thank you. Yes, I will be brief. I would like to build on what the mayor has just said about housing. It's indeed extremely important, and you will be pleased to hear that the Secretary General of the United Nations, in his report, Our Common Agenda, which is charting out the future of the United Nations, is putting housing as one of the 5 pillars of social protection. It's an essential pillar of social protection to leave no one behind. And this is very remarkable, and we're going to follow up on that in the coming months and years to ensure that this is getting a lot of traction, not only through UN Habitat, but through other UN agencies. I just want to give you another example of how we can support cities. Cities alone are limited, but for instance, on the digital rights issues, we are collaborating with the City Coalitions for Digital Rights, and which is an organization that brings together cities and UN agencies and others to defend digital rights in urban settings, to develop capacity, knowledge. And this has helped a lot during the pandemic, during the lockdowns and extended periods of isolation, to pass information, to mobilize resources. So we believe such coalitions can be useful to support cities, to learn from each other, so that they don't see their own situation in isolation, such as an issue of digital rights. And also in response to that, we have launched a flagship program of UN Habitat on people-centered smart cities. We really believe that the people-centered dimension is the key in the discussion on smart cities, and we're going to hammer on that again for the coming years about how smart cities can be inclusive, how digital rights can be embedded in the digitization agenda of the local governments. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. Ja, ich bitte auch jetzt
Thank you very much. Then I would like to ask Mr. Dimitrakopoulos from the Human Rights Agency on a short statement on this first issue, please.
Thanks very much. And I also found the theatre examples very, very interesting. And local authorities could use such tools to relay their messages. But going back to your main question now, let me start with the international level. The international level, I think, can provide networking support, sharing experience, sharing good practice. In the context of the European Union, also share experience about funding and how it works. But I think most important is the national level and most critical for actually working with and delivering on human rights at local level. What the national level can do in the context of the governments is, first of all, to provide legal clarity on local competences and what is the scope of the specific responsibilities that municipalities and local authorities have. Again, in an EU context, that also concerns the European structural funds. For example, the new legislation has a number of conditions for the use of funds. And local authorities are the ones who will use the funds in most cases. So national government has to provide them with a know-how as to how they will be able to abide by their human rights responsibilities when they spend the money. The second is for the governments to provide technical assistance with indicators and data collection so that a good human rights-based monitoring for the projects and for the measures taken by local authorities can be assured. Apart from government itself, it's also the statutory human rights bodies that exist in all countries, national human rights institutions, ombuds institutions, equality bodies in Europe, that can support local authorities in interpreting and working with them to interpret their human rights obligations at local level. What does it actually mean in practice? And finally, both international and in particular national civil society organizations, strong and powerful civil society organizations, can provide useful support to the local, to the grassroots organizations in terms of sharing expertise and developing capacity building. Thank you.
Ja, vielen Dank. Ich möchte aufgrund der
Thank you very much. I would like to move on to the next round of discussion, and we are starting with a clip from the legislative theatre project of housing as a human right. This topic is now poverty and legal arbitrariness. And what we see is people who don't have a home and who move into a house where they experience terrible things. So let us see the video.
Ja, wir haben ein Zimmer frei.
Yes, there is a free room. It's 10 square meters and it's 220 euros in summer and 280 in winter. It's all the furniture is in there. Is there anything else I'd have to pay? Any down payment? Any commission? No. No commission, no down payment, nothing. Well, that's great. Would you like to take a look? Yes, please. So here's the toilet, occupied. All the people here on this floor share this toilet. The shower is on the 3rd floor. On the 3rd floor? Yes. We have 40 people living here and they share 3 showers. And your room is the one at the end of the corridor. So do you take it? Yes, I take it. If you have the 280 euros with you, then you can move in right away. Yes, I do have the money with me. Let me take it out. Okay, thank you very much. And you can register with the police once you have paid the 2nd rent. What? That's weird. I thought I have to register with the police after 3 days after moving in. You know, Miss Hiebler, I don't want people here registering only for the sake of having an official address. By the way, you also have to register for electric power. That's a very simple process. You just contact Energie Graz. Well, if that's the case, then I'll do it. One more thing, you're not allowed to have any visitors. You know, I'd like to have it quiet and peaceful here in this house. That's a shame, but if this is the rule, okay, then have a good time in your new room. Bye-bye. Hi, I'm Antonia. I've just moved in. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Could you take a look? I have bugs here in my room. Do you know what this is, what they are? Well, that's cockroaches. Let me get my spray. Oh my God, this stinks. What did you eat? Oh my God. Blah. Here's your spray bag, thank you. Hi. Hi, I'm your new neighbor. My name is Antonia. Well, you also have a leaky ceiling. No, but I have cockroaches. But let me tell you, if you have a hole in your ceiling, then the landlady shall take care of that. It's her duty. Just tell her. Oh, you believe me, I've told her often enough, but she does only what's really necessary. But that's her house. Please believe me, you will get to know her. Mr. Kreiner, Mr. Kreiner, I know you are there. Oh my God, it's always the same. He'll be the next one to move out. You always have to remind them of paying the rent. Oh, there's a note. Mr. Kreiner, you still haven't paid the rent for the month of April. Pay it by Monday or you'll have to move out. Mr. Kreiner, I'm really sorry. I found this note on the floor, but obviously it's a letter that's addressed to you. Oh yeah, she does it all the time. She always leaves a note in front of our door. Everybody sees that we get a message and she never uses the mailbox. Oh shit, what now? There's no light. The light's gone out. Do you have power? Well, apparently there's been a power cut. I guess it's the lady from the 3rd floor. If she has a psychotic episode, she always plays with the fuses. Oh my God, that's dangerous. Yeah, well, that's the type of house this is. Oh my God, the people living here. Mr. Kreiner, why do you live here? Well, that was after a separation. I lost my job. I lost my flat. So I'm staying here for the moment. The conditions are unbearable. That's terrible. We can't put up with that. You know what? I'm happy that I have a roof above my head. So it's the landlady's house and it's the landlady's rules. The next clip, leave no one behind. We move into the future. So we assume that the recommendations of the Academy have been implemented, and we see a meeting of the steering committee of the Graz Action Plan against poverty. And we have one of the 4 mayors again, a spokesperson for anti-discrimination, and so somebody who represents people affected by poverty. There's also a member from the social planning team of the Graz and a politician from the municipal council who is the chairman of the social and housing committee.
It is a top priority for us as the city of Graz that everyone has access to affordable housing. Low-income groups should not be dependent on housing of this kind. Also, the human right to housing must finally be enshrined in the Austrian constitution without reservations, just like we did as a guideline for the city of Graz. It is even more important that the National Action Plan Against Poverty finds its equivalent at the local level. This is why we are here. We intend to adopt the Graz Action Plan Against Poverty soon. So how is the current status at the Office for Social Planning?
For us, it is important that the program is set up in such a way that it outlasts elections.
Yeah.
We have all seen this before. After the election, things that were decided simply disappear from the agenda.
True.
But within the framework of our city coalition, we are in constant exchange anyway. We draw inspiration from best practice examples from all around the world. And many of their suggestions are already included.
Thank you. Yeah, and how is the current status at the Housing and Social Committee and the local council?
In order to be truly sustainable, like you said, all parties must agree to the decision. That is difficult, but we are working on it.
We understand the urgency. However, there were still important suggestions from those affected by poverty in the latest workshops. They are absolutely necessary to take into account.
Please, We need to finally seal the deal.
What does the SDG say again? Leave no one behind?
Exactly. For us NGOs, these international objectives are important guidelines. Actually, they are important for all of us here in this room. We have to keep it.
There are still many people living in poverty, and COVID-19 has aggravated the situation. The Sustainable Development Goals of the UN focus on the eradication of poverty, and they call for an access to adequate, safe and affordable housing for all. The new urban agenda also provides further guidance on how adequate urbanization processes can be transformative force to implement the SDGs. But as of now, the right to housing and appropriate housing is often not enshrined in national law. The mayor of Graz has already mentioned that this is also the case in Austria. And the same seems to be the case concerning national action plans on the eradication of poverty. In everyday practice, it's rather the local level that plays a key role in developing and implementing housing policies that really leave nobody behind. So in this second round, I would now like to ask you, against this background and based on your own experience, what would you recommend to other governments? How can the global claims of the SDGs and the new urban agenda best be implemented also at the local level? And I ask you all for a short statement, and I would like to start with the mayor, because she only has a few more minutes to stay with us, so maybe I can ask her for a very brief statement here. Could you please switch on your microphone? Thank you very much.
Aus meiner Sicht ist es schwer, der Befund, dass es das Menschenrecht auf bezahlbaren
The human right to affordable housing, the fact that this is an obvious need goes without saying. So this is something that we should have. But the conditions vary from country to country, obviously. And it also depends on what the rules and regulations are that a state defines, and what rules are in place that ensure a minimum income. So, of course, it makes a difference whether a state provides social assistance or no social assistance at all. Austria is a country where we do have social benefits and social assistance, but as we have seen recently, this social assistance is undergoing a reform. It's being reorganized, and for some people, the benefits are not sufficient. And many cannot even afford precarious living space. And the subsidies for housing sometimes can no longer be applied for by people who would need it. So let me explain that there are two pillars. So in order to be eligible for housing benefit, a person needs to be unemployed or must not earn enough. And what is important is that these people still have enough money left in order to meet their basic demands. And so we know that there are big differences, but in cities, more and more often, people and families with children have to live in houses, or sorry, they have to live in flats that are inappropriate. just because they do not have enough money and because laws are such that these people do not have access to housing. And we have to fight this. And in order to do that, we have to use all the tools that we have at the communal and regional level. What we can do in Graz is to offer financial support without red tape, and this has been on the this will be on the agenda of the municipal council meeting in February, where we want to make sure that funding and subsidies will be provided to those who are dependent on it. And this is something that the city of Graz agrees on. Thank you very much, LKK, Mayor of the city of Graz. So a statement from the local perspective, but of course there is also the national framework. And the question is, what is the international connection? How are all these claims are connected? And I'd like to start by asking Mr. Howland for a brief statement, please, from the OHCHR.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, but I'm going to pass my time to Professor Shin, who didn't have a chance to speak last time, and say thank you very much for the participation, but I have to run to another event at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sehr gerne. Bitte, Herr Professor Shin.
Mr. Shin, Professor Shin, what is your perspective?
Thank you very much for asking me to talk about my idea. In fact, I was quite a lot impressed by the level of understanding of the housing issues by Mayor Ka. We hope that we have many political leaders like you in Korea, because we are facing an enormous housing problem all over the nation, and that's how the progressive government has losing its popularity among the people. So the political agenda like this seems to be one of the most important issues. And then again, the drama shows that how tricky the housing issue is in terms of human rights protection. So the drama, even though it was simple, but it successfully showed the trickiness, the level of trickiness of the housing issue. It also shows that there is no panacea on housing issue. As Mayor Ka mentioned, there are two pillars which exclude the people who cannot handle themselves financially. So, by the way, I am impressed also some comments of the people, pushback effect or reaction to the progressive policies of the government. Then the people can swing to the extreme conservatism. It was mentioned by Ade. So I really believe that I found that the political leaders in Western countries also, they are like playing on a tightrope to protect human rights as well as the support of the people in election. So it is quite a tricky matter. In addition, I also emphasize the importance of education, that Chuck Watts mentioned that empathy is the soul of effective public government. The empathy can be effectively educated when people are young. So again, I want to emphasize the importance of education and the importance of UNESCO role in citizen education to promote empathy and then tolerance of when people are young to develop that skill. Thank you very much.
Vielen herzlichen Dank für dieses so auch kraftvolle und sehr.
Thank you very much for this powerful and also emphatic statement. And perhaps between South Korea and Graz, there will be a new axis. Please, Mr. Tutz, you have the floor. We pass the floor to you now.
Thank you very much. And sorry, I will also have to leave after this intervention, but I think it's been a very great engagement. I also really appreciate the medium that you use to pass the messages through the theater. This is all very wonderful, but unfortunately the time is up as I have to move. But I just want to end with answering your question about, you know, these international agreements, the new urban agenda and the SDGs. Indeed, they are there. We need to translate them to the local level. And, you know, housing, again, is very strongly represented in SDG 11.1, which we are following as the custodian agency. And it really focuses for the first time on adequate and affordable housing. And adequate housing in itself has already 6 dimensions of adequacy. So really the theater play was an excellent example of how these different dimensions of adequacy play out. So that's what we're doing. We are committed to do this until the end of the SDGs and beyond. I just want to emphasize one thing, perhaps, or two. One is the voluntary local reviews. This is a mechanism that complements what the national governments do to report the accomplishment of the SDGs. So more and more local and regional governments are now putting up voluntary local reviews to show where they are in the implementation of all the SDGs, but also including the human rights dimensions and issues like housing and others that are very close to our interest. Finally, I would like to say that, you know, within the housing, also we are looking at subgroups, for instance, disability. And we have recently put out a report on the right to adequate housing for persons with disabilities and a study on living in cities, which looks at a human rights approach to the development of opportunities for people with disabilities related to housing. Again, this is something that local governments can learn from, so that they really are, it's much quicker to use certain local legislation to adapt that based on international good practice. I'll leave it here. Thank you very much, and all the best with the rest of the conference. Bye-bye.
Ja, vielen Dank, Herr Tutz, für die Teilnahme.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Tutz, for the participation. I want to ask Mr. Dimitrapoulos to ask him whether it's okay that he gives the statement in the last round rather than this round.
Absolutely fine. Thank you. Ja.
Dankeschön. Dann kommen wir ein paar Minuten noch.
Okay, so we'll continue with the next round. Miss Elkeka also, the mayoress wanted to say goodbye. You couldn't hear her, but she said goodbye. Yes, thank you. Now we can hear. And I wanted to say, like, it was an honor to be here, an honor and a privilege. And I wish you the best of strength and force. Right, so now we come to the part 4, from commitment to responsibility. There's a short clip about sexual harassment in the public space. So there is a video clip about a sexual harassment in public spaces. We did that with young adults, and the title is "No Means No, Sexual Harassment in Public Spaces Should Not Take Place." Please let it roll.
Hey, super.
Oi, Dolly, what about a quick fuck, basically? Oi, Dolly, what about jumping into the bed? What's your name? Who are you? Hey, Dolly, what about a one-night stand? Don't talk to me like that. Stop. Oi, Dolly, what about a one-night stand? Now! In Graz 2040, sexist harassment is not tolerated anymore. In Graz 2040, sexual harassment is not tolerated anymore. It's a no-go. Well, now we have an outlook to Graz 2040 about, well, we see the mayor, the actress mayor, who we saw beforehand, a member of the community service and somebody from the Independent Monitoring Association or Monitoring Board. Here.
Unbelievable. Seeing pictures like in the No Means No clip, I can't believe that sexist assault in public spaces have once been such a big deal here.
This project is quite a long time ago. And the situation improved a lot in the recent years. And that is noticeable in the daily work also. Yeah, and the cooperation with other players works really well. However, we still need to make significant improvements when it comes to awareness and participation of the population. Many people know nothing about the great measures the city introduced. And also that we, the community workers, are in charge of conflict resolution and anti-discrimination in public spaces.
Mm. Yes, whenever we meet in public spaces like this one, I realize how important it was to create new competences and new jobs in this area. It's good that back then so many young people were interested in these jobs. Also, I think that's where it really made a difference that the city of Graz became active because of its self-commitment. And yeah, because you were just mentioning it, what can we do to make these measures more known?
I have an idea. We also pointed out in our latest monitoring report that there is a lack of public relation, and we made suggestions for improvement. For example, in the campaigns led by UN Women, there are many good examples of how cities make their commitments known to the public.
That sounds really interesting. Can you send me the addresses?
For sure.
I'm sure we can get inspiration out of it.
For sure. For sure.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Yes, thank you very much. During the academy in the last week and yesterday, we found with a lot of joy that many young people from all over the world made good contributions about assuming the obligation to human rights. The next generation is eager to find solutions to the current challenges and is ready to help shape the future. Now, my question to Mr. Dimitrakopoulos is, how can we make sure that the views and priorities of the next generation are heard and taken seriously also after this conference? So what role can local, national and international actors play in helping the next generation shape the future of human rights practice? And how can young people become a part of and support the local level's human rights commitment?
Thank you. I'll be quite brief, and I'll speak about the local level rather than the international or the national level. If you want to engage, if you want to involve young people at the local level, you need, first of all, as we say, to get them young. So work in, with, and for schools. You need to go into the schools, understand what they need, understand what their priorities are, and offer them opportunities to engage in as much as possible a practical way so that they can understand how things are created and invite them to create things, to build things. So teaching simply, about human rights simply by referring to them in a lecture-like way doesn't really work. So you need to engage and you need to show them exactly like in the video that you showed before, how this can work in practice. Thank you.
Vielen Dank für dieses Statement.
Yes, thank you very much for this statement. And I would like to ask Mr. Shin now what he thinks about.
I also agree with Mr. Dimitriakopoulos about the need of education, especially when people are young. I talked about education of empathy and then inclusiveness, tolerance when people are young. So when they are educated young, when they are educated while young, the impact is sustainable and then everlasting. So education seems to be important. In addition, legislation enactment seems to be also important. When people violate that kind of human rights, it is not simply a matter of personal decision, but it should be restricted by the law. That's how we can make it more sustainable. And then again, international collaboration, sharing through different kind of activities, including like acting out, seems to be really important as well. Thank you very much.
Ja, auch vielen Dank.
Yes, thank you very much to you as well. And the final document also says that the communities should or can fulfill their obligations by creating jobs that the communities themselves create. Now, to wrap up this discussion, I would like to show another short video from Andashil Lozano, who cannot be here because of her illness, but I would like to show this video now.
Government are confronted daily with a complex and changing dynamic in their social, political, and economic environment, where citizens demand immersion in different spheres. Why did I choose the fourth round, from commitment to responsibility? Because I believe that in the new generation is the true force of change. As a professor of history at the University of Buenos Aires, I sit daily in the classroom. The new social actors of change are young people, for which we have to work on them, training leaders in human rights by holding workshops, courses that put the theme on the front line. Our center will carry out the international course on human rights, reaching 47 countries and more than 600 students. Also, thematic hearing contest in human rights. Education is the key. I would like to depend in the role that local, national, and regional actors can play in helping the next generation shape the future of human rights practice. For this, our center that I manage is working on 5 main topics related to local government at a regional level where young people is included. Number 1, catalog of inclusive local public policies. Number 2, Construir Igualdad, Award 2022. Number 3, Latin American and the Caribbean local government training on Escazú Agreement. Number 4, Gender and Local Government Guide. Number 5, online survey to young Latin Americans. The data will define the thematic lines that will be addressed in our project for and with the youth of the region to design projects from a closer and more inclusive perspective, aligning our objective with the voices of young people. I'm sorry again for the inconvenience. I'm sure that I had contributed from Argentina with our view and knowing project that inclusive young people. Thank you very much.
Ja, und vielen, vielen Dank von unserer Seite.
Thank you very much also to Argentina for this statement. Now I would like to thank all the participants in the panel discussion for their contributions, for their statements, for discussing with us. And now I would like to pass the floor back to Klaus Stadler and Renate Kicker and ask them for a few concluding remarks on this conference. Thank you very much, Michael Rentschur. And of course, I would like to thank in particular all the speakers, all the members who participated in the panel discussion. Thank you for sharing your contributions and thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your ideas and your thoughts. We would like to thank in particular also the participants of the Academy and the participants of the conference, especially the participants of the Academy who spent 1 week with us and who have really proven that they are highly committed. So during this week, we have really achieved a lot. We had about 100 experts who came together to exchange experience and to develop tools, methods and strategies. One thing that I would like to highlight is that we managed to include and get involved the next generation in this discussion. The interest is great. We had 100 young experts who registered for the discussion rounds last Friday. All the findings, all the experience has been incorporated in a final document that was today presented to an audience of 400 people worldwide. And the cooperation with the local and the global levels was definitely expanded and strengthened this week. So what will be the next steps? We are now going to prepare the findings, make them publicly accessible, and then start to prepare the next academy. I wish you a nice afternoon or a nice day and a good night to our colleagues and friends in the Far East. Thank you.
We have now reached the end of this second fascinating conference experience. And I would like to thank the center's partner, the University of Graz and its UNESCO chair, as well as the organizing team for their tireless efforts. Markus Möstl, Isabella Meyer, and Livia Persci all made significant contributions to the Academy and the conference. Agnes Romanin organized the Next Generation Human Rights Networking event, and the overall organizational management was in the capable hands of Wanda Tiefenbacher, as it was last year. Thank you also to our team of interpreters who helped us communicate in 3 different languages, and to the background technicians who helped us communicate with you all over the world. Stay healthy and please join us again next year. Thank you.